The Guardians rotation carried them to another division title in 2025 with a great September. The rotation is going to have to do that again in 2026 with their lineup. If they want an AL Central three-peat, we'll go under the hood to see if they can do that with player development analyst Lance Brozdowski.
Tanner Bibee of the Guardians, and you're listening to Locked On Guardians.
You are Locked On Guardians, your daily podcast on the Cleveland Guardians. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome on in, Guardians fans, to another episode of Locked On Guardians, the only daily podcast on your Cleveland Guardians that covers the team from the majors, the minors, the draft, and everything in between. And we've got kind of an in-between that connects all those things today on this show. So it's going to be a lot of fun. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network, thanks to you all. I'm, of course, Justin Lada. If you're new here, one of your two co-hosts, Jeff Ellis, is off today. Been here for 4 years, and I've been covering the Guardians minor league system since 2007. So this is going to be my 19th year, believe it or not. And thanks for making Locked On Guardians your first listen today and every day, wherever it is you get podcasts. And we are thrilled to bring in Lance Brozdowski today to talk Guardians pitching rotation, data and metrics on some prospects. We'll talk about some development trends as well. And data, Lance is really smarter than Jeff and I on pitching, development, metrics, data, all those things. So I'm going to be in for a good lesson today, and I know you will as well. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like on a lot of these pods, because I obviously cover the Cubs for like a day job and stuff, and then I'm very much locked on like the league. But I enjoy going on these pods because sometimes I'll have questions for you because like you probably know the nuance of like, oh, he said that he was working on X, Y, or Z, where sometimes that'll just escape me. So I enjoy these. I enjoy like digging into some of these pitchers, and Gavin Williams is a guy that I loved a lot last year. Is one of my like breakout picks, and man, for that April, I looked like a giant idiot, and then everything turned around and it looked great. So I'm really happy that we can move on from how bad that call looked in April.
Yeah, September, you looked really right. That's what we were all.
Yes, that's all that matters,
for.
right?
Yeah. It's all about what have you done for me lately. And the most recent month of his pitching performance was pretty good. Real quick before we dive in, I want to let you know you can find Lance on YouTube. You can find him over at Marquee covering the Cubs, as he said. You can find him on Substack. So a lot of good places. I'll link to all those in the show notes. Just so much good content out there to consume that you just literally can't do it all because there's so many good videos out there. And highly recommend following Lance everywhere you find baseball content because you'll just be smarter and you'll have more fun learning about baseball and all this stuff. So Lance, let's dive into Gavin Williams a little bit. So September, the Guardians pitching staff as a whole was the best pitching staff in baseball. If you want to go by ERA, Fangraphs WAR, I think strikeout to walk ratio, like they had a great September, and that was the pitching rotation we expected here in Cleveland. I don't know if you can expect that for a 6 or 7 month season, but that was close to what we thought we were going to see last year. And a big part of that was Gavin Williams, who, went toe to toe in the playoffs with Tarek Skubal. How much do you think it mattered his sequencing? Because like he went and had 3 fastballs last year. And I think, 2 of them kind of stunk, to be honest. If you look at the performance, I know there's more to it than just the outputs, but how big of a deal you think it was that he's got 3 fastballs now and his sequencing that changed in September, he was throwing his curveball more. Do we think that, like, I'm not going to say like, okay, September Gavin Williams is the real Gavin Williams for all 2026, but do you think you saw enough there under the hood and performance wise to think like, okay, we're getting closer to seeing this guy being the Gavin Williams we expected?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're getting closer to it. He had kind of like a weird season, which we're talking about right now. It's very obvious that he had a weird season. But I also say he had a weird season from like a usage perspective. Like if you look specifically versus righties, he like opens up 4-seam sweep. That sweep's like a little bit of a variant from the prior slider he threw. You go to the middle of the year and he adds this like what you could call bad cutter, like in this land of stuff, which is combining velocity, release metrics, and shape. A lot of the time, a cutter that moves arm side is just not good. But the caveat is like if you can locate it, it doesn't really matter. And I do think I've had like Chris Langan, who did some stuff for Driveline in the past and trains pitchers and stuff, had a really good thread a bit ago about how like bad cutters can actually fit in arsenals sometimes, especially with like the level of what I think is like pretty competent command for a guy like Gavin Williams. He's a little more stuff over command, but it's not like awful command. So like he adds that pitch, goes more sinker, more curve. And it's funny because like he came up as this guy who was pretty heavy 4-seam curve. And it's almost like we're starting to see this turn towards more of like actually that over the top guy is now becoming more lateral, which is again what we've seen with Tanner Bibee as well. So I've been thinking about this from like is it just a 2 sample thing on these guys where they're starting to become a little more not east-west, despite the fact their slots are more north-south, if that makes any sense. And then the end of the year, it's like, okay, ton more sinkered back to sweeper, which is what solidified this thought for me, where it's like beginning of the year, it's 4-seam sweep, end of the year, it's more sink sweep to righties. And lefties, we see a similar trajectory. Middle of the season, he adds the cutter. It backs up, which is a little safer against lefties because if he's throwing it away, it's not going to leak back middle of the plate. The angle for me there is like he wasn't great in 2-strike counts to lefties throughout the year, which makes me think the old days of like him being 4-seam change curve is maybe what he needs to go back to versus lefties. So you can kind of see what I'm doing here. It's like you turn him into like a lower slot sink sweep guy to righties, then you turn him back into the 4-seam change guy to lefties, and maybe you end up with a better, the 4 ERA projection that most sites are giving him right now, 160 innings. So yeah, he's a tough one. Like it's been a roller coaster. He's had injury problems in the past. He's a guy that I often comp other pitchers to as well. When I see like big bodied, 4-seam curve, over the top, a decent velo with like light injury history, he's always the name I end up going to. His trajectory has been fascinating. I think he's a good pitcher. It's a matter of like where the upside is, and it seems like they're trying to massage him into that.
Yeah, he is really, really hard to figure out. It almost seems like Gavin Williams, if you're not like one of the game's elite pitchers, like, there's only so many of those guys like Tarek Skubal and Paul Skeens. It almost seems like you have to evolve almost every single year because your pitch mix people get used to it. And if you don't have some of the good characteristics with it, like sequencing becomes very important and your pitch mix becomes very important. And that's kind of where I wanted to hit with Tanner Bibee as well too. So I've been following Tanner Bibee for a long time since he was in the minors, and he started out with this really high arm slot, and then he dropped it because of some not like serious pain issues, but like just discomfort. And he rose it back up a little bit, but his fastball has not been good the last 2 years, 4-seam results wise, as it was when he had that high arm slot in 2023 and made his debut. But he's also a 3 fastball guy now too. The control was wonky last year. Like there was just a lot going on. And I'm wondering if you think is there a pitch shape thing? Like the fastball is an issue. Was it just a fluky year? Is it a sequencing thing? Like, do you see anything there that again, he was another guy who in September seemed to figure it out. Do you have anything there in terms of what he might have figured out and what might help to get him back to the guy that, earned that contract extension?
Yeah, I mean, I would say most of the time in projecting guys, it's always a little bit difficult to parse out, okay, end of season, he did really well. Do we just assume that's where he picks up off the next season? Right. That is the ultimate thing on the projection side to figure out. A lot of the times projections are just going to zoom out and take the full season. And maybe that's where projections are weak to some extent. I always say, projections are very good, but the way you make breakout picks is to ID a projection that is missing something that you think is sticky from the prior year. Do I see that with Bibee? I don't entirely know. I would say no. I think he's a good pitcher. He regressed pretty hard from 2024. The ultimate thing that's new with him, Gavin changed some things. Bibee did the same thing. He started throwing a sinker because the 4-seam wasn't great in 2024. So if you're nitpicking on hey, you were really good in 24, how do we make you even better? It's man, this land, I think he did this at the end of 24. He started throwing a sinker, but this is the land to go to, right? Where it's give me more sink to righties. Now all of a sudden, because your slot's weird, again, he's a vertical slot guy who's a bit more east-west in terms of the shapes he creates. It provides a weird look. You back off the 4-seam that got beat up. Maybe this all works. And he did the same thing to lefties as well. He cut the 4-seam down and kind of just used everything more. And he was worse. So it's a tough one to peg as to whether the development actions they took were just not what's going to make him better. But I also agree that if he just did what he did in 2024, I don't think he was going to post what he did in 2024, to your point about constantly needing to adjust to stay ahead. The thing I think I like the most in his repertoire that I'm curious to see if the Guardians will lean on more is this short slider he throws. I think Savant tags it as a cutter. It's a slider in my perspective based on the movement of the pitch. He might cue cutter or use a cutter grip, but the resulting movement is very slidery. And this pitch was really good. He could zone it too. It's almost to me this angle of okay, versus lefties, what if you use that as your primary? What if you're actually slider first early count to get ahead of guys and protect the 4-seam a bit? He started throwing sinkers to lefties too, which is odd, but it kind of worked. His command of it down was good. And maybe you could do the same template to lefties, or to righties, where you're sink, short slider, big sweeper, and you turn into Gavin Williams to some extent, where we look back 2-3 years ago, and we're like, wow, this guy was 4-seam over the top curve, and now look at he's sink sweep. So it's been interesting to follow the trajectory of both these guys, especially knowing the Guardians organization is like a fastball carry, fastball forward style organization. I don't think it's like a trend where they're changing. I wonder if they're trying to blend together their strengths alongside what works in the league context, which is to be kind of adaptable, have the 3 fastballs as you've mentioned a couple times here. Threading that balance is tough. It's getting to the point where like teams are, I think, having a tougher time separating from one another from like this is our philosophy. And I wonder whether we're starting to see some like convergence on ideas, and maybe that's good. Maybe that's bad. Hitters are going to tell us.
Yeah, groupthink can always be a little bit dangerous, especially when you have a team that might poach. Like the Guardians pitching people always get poached, and hitters are training for this stuff a lot more. You got those the traject machines, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's very hard to stay ahead, and what your pitch mix worked with last year might not be as good as it was a year ago. It's just so funny to see like Gavin Williams throws like these 2 or 3 pitches to lefties, but he throws these 2 or 3 to righties, and same with Tanner Bibee, just because of the shapes and what hitters see and all that kind of stuff. All right, I got 2 more pitchers in the rotation I want to pick your brain about, and then we're going to dive into a couple prospects. One, you already did a video on YouTube channel. I'd love to hear more about that. And then also some other pitching metrics and data that I think I want to hear you find interesting, or things you kind of keep an eye on in terms of pitching development. So we'll cover that next. Spring training has started up. College baseball started. We got a little taste of warm weather this week in Cleveland. So we know spring is around the corner, but that also means tax season is around the corner. It is here. And it doesn't have to take over your life. This year, TurboTax is making it easier than ever to just hand things off and move on with your day. So with TurboTax Full Service, you can have your taxes done for you by a trusted local expert start to finish. No stress, no guesswork. As I've talked about multiple times on here, we have multiple streams of income, 1099s. We have full-time jobs. So a lot of our tax situation can get a little messy and complicated. It's not something we want to sit around and deal with all day. We've got other things to do. We've got wives, families, and baseball stuff to do. So TurboTax experts help us out. For a limited time, you can have your taxes done by a local TurboTax expert for just $150 all in. If a TurboTax expert did not file for you last year, all you got to do is file by February 28th. Take taxes off your plate. Get back to your life. Visit TurboTax.com/local to book your appointment today. As always, thanks for making Locked On Guardians your first listen thing every day, wherever it is you get podcast. If you are enjoying this conversation, you want to ask more questions, if you want to get more information, maybe you want to talk to some other Guardians fans or other Locked On hosts, you can check that out over on the Discord as part of the Everydayer Club. Get the ad-free episode of Locked On Guardians, Discord access, all that fun stuff for just $5 a month or $50 a year. Go to lockedonguardians.supercast.com or check the link in the show notes to learn more about that. All right, Lance, I got 2 more pitchers I want to ask you about from the Guardians rotation. The first one's Joey Cantillo, who I have been a big fan of for a long time. When Cleveland acquired him, I was really excited about that. I love the changeup. I love the projection there. This is all health dependent with him in my eyes, but where do you stand on Joey Cantillo as far as like, can he get major league hitters out? Like he's had better fastball velocity in the past. He's got great extension. The fastball hasn't been great metrically and results wise, but like I know this offseason he's been talking about working on his fastball velocity because we've seen it up to 97 in short stints. He already has that high arm slot. He has the extension that should help it, but it hasn't been good so far. But I love his changeup and I love his curveball. If he can stay healthy, I've been saying a mid-rotation upside is what's there for him. Do you see anything that backs that up, or maybe not quite there?
Yeah, I'm pretty biased on Joey here. So he was one of like the first players I talked to, like in this journalism career I've gotten into, when he was back in Fort Wayne with the Padres and I covered the Midwest League. So I wouldn't say him and I are like friends, but I went to Hawaii with my fiance like a couple years ago, and I like DM'd him and I got some like recs, and I had the best poke bowl of my life via him. So like we have this like funny connection where he like knows who I am, and like we've kind of kept in touch. And I will say the reason I'm bringing this up is because I've seen his development, and it's been really fascinating to me because I remember way back in Fort Wayne, we were talking about this weird Vulcan changeup he throws and how like he has this weird innate feel for it, despite the fact like I don't know who else throws like the Vulcan style change and can get it in zone like above 50% of the time. I don't even know, like in the history of baseball, who could do that. A lot of the time that pitch is just like a dive below the zone offering. And it works. Like there's something about it. It mimes the four seam shape a lot. And it destroys hitters in the zone. 51% zone whiff rate I saw on it. It's incredible. Like he can survive with that pitch alone. I would agree the four seam's like not particularly good, partially because he doesn't really spin the ball well at all. And that's why he has a good changeup. So despite the fact he's like super over the top, super efficient, he just can't carry the ball because his spin rates are like really, really low. I don't think he's ever going to change that. Now, the way to change it is just to push the velo. This is something you bring up with like a Roki Sasaki all the time. And I mentioned a lot last offseason, just like he can't spin the ball. The slider approach with him is probably just to give him some kind of cutter and have him rip it as hard as humanly possible. So like this trajectory of Joey adding velo is something that him and I talked about way back in Fort Wayne. And I think when he got to the Guardians org from the Padres org, like the Padres org was just behind the Guardians org at the time. And he didn't tell me this, but in talking to other people, like I just don't think the Padres are doing a great job developing velocity. And I think the Guardians have presented him with far more paths to developing his body, particularly. Like he got huge. Like when I met him, he was not big. And now he's a big dude now. He's like jacked. Yes. And like I'm waiting for the velo to come, and I think it will. It's just probably going to take a bit more time. Again, he's a Hawaiian high school guy. Like I'm not surprised that it's taken a bit more for him to get where he is. He's a very weird pitcher. It's really difficult to project a guy like this, in my opinion, because the four seam quality is not good, because the spin rate's not good. So like, is it like a lefty Kevin Gossman with better release traits where he can just survive on a four seam that grabs the zone in the change? That's like an absolute 99th percentile outcome. Right. I'm not sure what the balance is in the middle, like a change of first lefty. There's probably a lot of them just escaping me right now. But yeah, I'm confident in his ability to work hard because he's added a ton of velo and he's developed incredibly well. So I'm on him. Yeah, I think maybe it takes more time. Like this feels like one of those things where it keeps stacking year to year, and like 3 more years down the road, he'll be, I don't know how old he is right now, but he'll probably be like 27. Yeah, he'll be 28 at that point. Like that's maybe when we then see it all click and come together. And the fact that he just has this wacky changeup keeps him in the league for long enough such that teams tolerate the slower development that might occur with a guy like this. But I do love him. I know he's a fun breakout pick people have for the coming season. Saris' stuff model on Fangraphs just updated, and I think he got a pretty big boost because the lefties as a whole are just really good in the league now. So yeah, he does a lot of weird things, and maybe that's really what we're all hunting at the end of the day.
Yeah. The weirder you can be, maybe the more you can stand out, because that's the thing is hitters train based on repetition. And if you're so much different than everybody else, it's harder to adjust to. Slade Cecconi is the other guy I wanted to talk about too. I know you wrote a little bit about him last year too, and the metrics, like if you just look at Savant, like there's nothing redeeming on his Savant page about what he did last year. The results weren't bad. He had some really good moments. So the big look at him this year is like, okay, maybe he needs another year to develop too, because he's in his first full off season with Cleveland. But like the only really redeeming quality about him last year is he didn't walk anybody despite the really good results. So what are you seeing kind of there about him, and what have you read or just dived into more on him? That is he a weird guy too? Is he always going to be a guy that just like out pitches the peripherals, or do you think there's some big changes for him? Because I think he's a big regression candidate. That kind of scares me.
Yeah, I agree there more. He's like the opposite of weird. He's like pretty stock. Like everything he does is pretty normal. He just like pounds the zone. Like I struggle a bit. Like it's funny. I was on him last year because my angle a lot of the time with breakout picks is like guy goes from organization I don't think was good at pitching development to good organization. So my thesis a lot is just like they're just going to change things. And I think that's good most of the time. And it doesn't always hit. I guess it hit to some extent on Slade. Like they got close to a WAR out of him. He was like a 4.3 ERA guy. Peripheral Slade probably shouldn't have been that good. Gave up a lot of homers, didn't strike out guys. So like he's not doing great on 2 of the 3 things that pitchers, on the stat side, we argue can control a bit more. But yeah, I mean, he's like a challenge hitter guy. And I guess these guys sometimes just run into success. And I think historically, I know Fangraphs, I can mention them a couple times, but like they're doing like a retrospective, it's like the prospect week. And I love reading Eric Longenhagen's thoughts on old lists. So he was looking at like the 2019 top 100 prospect list. And one of the things he brought up was like, you like learn, it's called How's My Driving, but it's basically like you learn about where your bias is. And one of the things he's pointed out that I am still trying to get over from a bias standpoint is just the dude who could throw strikes, being one that outperforms long-term. Because a lot of the time in the minors, what we're hunting is like the upside. We're hunting like the dude who can't throw strikes, but has insane shapes, who we're praying can throw strikes. When the reality is command is like probably one of the more immutable traits for guys. It's harder to change. You don't see massive leaps in it year over year. When it does happen, a lot of the time it's a little artsy as to how it occurred. It's hard to ID. It's hard to be like, oh, this guy changed this, therefore XYZ is going to happen. Like a lot of the time you just like take the guy's command and go, I'm just going to assume this is what he has for the rest of his career. So in that sense, that's the bull case on Slade. It's just like, he doesn't walk anybody. He's in the zone a lot. And he challenges hitters. That's probably enough for him to like leak out and get some of these seasons where he's like around a WAR. I just struggle to see where the upside is because I just don't think the stuff's good. Everything moves pretty close to his arm angle. He's not really deceptive in any way. Like I'm struggling to see where the access to upside is. And as a result of that, I'm not entirely sure what the ultimate bull case is on him. So maybe it's just around the fact that he just trudges along and doesn't strike out anybody and like somehow runs into a season where he limits the homers and the walks are down. And then all of a sudden it's like a 380 ERA, but probably still with bad peripherals because he's not striking out anybody. So I guess I'm kind of off him after being on him last year, just for the reasons you mentioned. Like I don't entirely think the stuff's good enough. And if he's successful, it's because the command's great.
Yeah, I know you had said that the Rays were interested in him too. And anytime a team like Cleveland or the Rays is interested in someone, you're like, okay, that's going to pique my interest a little bit. Why are they interested in him? It's almost like Cleveland shouldn't trade with Tampa Bay. You shouldn't trade anybody to Cleveland with any sort of pitching upside there as well. Maybe he'll end up being a fifth starter. I don't know. That was the knock on Josh Tomlin for a long time was like, hey, it's solo home runs won't kill you that much if you're around the zone. So it's just funny. Like that was, Josh Tomlin was like 89, 91 and Slade Cecconi is like 92, 94, could hit 97. So it's like the velocity doesn't really matter anymore these days than
92, 94 is the new 91. Yeah.
It really is. Yeah. If you're not throwing 94, you are, 20 years behind. All right. I want to ask you about a couple of pitching prospects. And I also wanted to see what some of the metrics and data that you really you lean on in terms of valuation and projection. We will dive into that here in just a second. If you are a member of Locked On Guardians Insiders, you already knew Lance was coming on today. You already knew what we were going to talk about. At least questions I was going to ask. I don't know if we could predict what he was going to say necessarily. But you could join that club at joinsubtext.com/LockedOnGuardians. You can get advance notice like that. Any other news when it happens, mailbag questions you can ask us for shows. And generally just other thoughts you can bounce off of us every single day. So head on over there to, if you're not really into the Discord thing and you're more of a one-on-one texter kind of person, an avenue for everybody to continue the conversation. All right, Lance, you just did a video on the top 100 prospects. Great video, by the way. I'd encourage everyone to go check it out. It was a lot of fun. You talked a little bit about Khal Stephen. You really like him, so hopefully that'll be prophetic this year as well. I've been really big on Khal Stephen too. Not a big stuff guy, but he kind of has that whole sum of his parts kind of thing. Is there anything in the data there, the traits you see with him that you're excited about, or is there anything to be concerned about? Because I'm pretty high on him myself, and I don't want to be talked down, but maybe I should temper my enthusiasm a little bit.
Yeah, I think it's a good mix. Again, I was mentioning this concept of the strikes guys tend to outperform long term. He's very much in that bucket. He throws a bunch of strikes. It's a deep mix. They gave him a cutter, I believe, right at the end of the year, from what I was looking at, that popped. So now it's he turns into a guy that is throwing, I guess you could say technically 4 breaking ball shapes. I have him with 4-seam split. The split's really good. Then he's got kind of the shorter slider, curve, sweeper, and cutter. The sweeper is not really used that much, but it's a mix that I think could work versus either handedness. He could go pretty pure 4-seam, split the lefties, then he could play around with any of these breaking balls to righties. He's a big dude, pretty over the top, good enough extension, above average release height. So it's more of a downhill playing 4-seam. And this brings me back to the idea of a Gavin Williams, you kind of comp, because it's kind of similar from a body type standpoint and what they do with the hand at release. It's not primo velo, but it's enough in my opinion. And I think the angles work for him from a downhill perspective. So I'm a fan. I think that he is maybe never a guy that posts a 4 season, 3.5-ish 4 season. I'm trying to figure out what machinations he goes through to get to that point. It's probably velocity side, or it's probably me underselling one of these breaking balls a bit, and that pops, and all of a sudden he's great versus righties, where he's already really good versus lefties. That pushes him to a 3.5-ish WAR season. Then you could really get into man, they won this trade by a mile with the Blue Jays. But yeah, he was a name that I was a bit surprised. I thought it was a hefty price to pay for Shane Bieber. But I mean, flags fly forever if you're the Blue Jays. Bieber re-upped too, and he's got arm soreness now. But you know, when he re-upped, it was a bit odd because I was like, he definitely opts out and takes a multi here, but clearly there's something going on with the medicals there. So I think the Guardians got out at like the exact right time, and I'm still kind of surprised they got what they got for him. Because if Steven pitches in the league and posts like 1.5, 2 WAR for 5 seasons, you know, to say, you know, injury or whatever, misses a year or something along those lines, as most teams would try to project, that's absolutely smashing in that trade, especially with Bieber not really being relevant. So yeah, I'm a fan. I think he's a good pitching prospect. He's not a guy that I think anybody's going to have top 15, top 10 in a top 40-ish kind of pitching prospect list, but very much relevant to the conversation. And I think he's crazy high floor.
Yeah, I was surprised to see him in top 100s, or at least I think he was in one top 100. So I wasn't 100% sure if that was going to be the case. Yeah,
because of the floor. Like we're hunting. Like I've seen a lot of like Kendry Churio from the Royals, and like I did a piece on him in Substack. Like I think he's fun, but like I don't know, that dude's like 5 years away. You know what I mean? It's like we're top 100 in now. Like it's inevitable he's going to fall out of the top 100 when he like slightly regresses. He's an undersized righty. He's got incredible strike feel, and he's throwing 95. Kendry is, but like I don't know. He's not to me like that feels a little weird. Like if you put Churio on and Steven off, I'd be like, okay, like there's no way we're going to eval this because Steven's going to be up next year probably. Churio's 4 years away, so it's just like I'm just going to take the sure bet in that situation and wait on Churio because a lot of the time those high school guys just fizzle out.
Yeah, I think there's I didn't really plan on diving into this, but like I feel like with the top 100 sometimes there's a tendency to lean towards guys who haven't failed yet. Like you're projecting the guy who hasn't failed yet. Yeah. And I'm like,
it's really hard to move off like low level, really strong results. Like I hate when I'm like, someone brings up a name to me and I go look and it's like, oh yeah, great. And then I look, it's like, oh, he was on Everett with the Mariners and it's like an A ball. And I don't know what to do with this data because the hitters are terrible. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's like, I don't really know what to tell you, man. Like, sure, he had a 30% K minus walk, but like, if I've run this through a stuff model right now, it's more average. So like, how much trajectory are you assuming here this guy develops? But we could go on forever on this, but it's a good point.
Right. Yeah. I wanted to touch quickly. I know there's some other stuff I wanted to ask you about metrics and data that you really lean on in value, but I wanted to ask you quickly too about like Parker Messick. And I know you've also talked about Tugboat in the past too. He was a guy you wrote about last year. You were like, he's interesting. And I'm like, yeah, well, I saw him this year and I think we figured out the fastball velocities, the fastball utility is just not there for him. And if he doesn't have like precise command, it's not going to work. Nice kid. I hope it works out for him. But like everybody was like, oh, this is a guy who had a breakout year. And I'm like, I'm not so sure.
Another good example of like low level performance, you know?
Yeah. But Parker Messick, I feel like has a lot of unique traits. Like if Slate Cecconi does kind of hit the rocks this year, like you said, if the command can't overcome the bad stuff, like Parker Messick, what we saw last year. And again, he's like a guy like Gavin Williams. Like, am I going to say like September Parker Messick is who he is? No, of course not. But I do think he showed enough last year that there's something in there. Obviously, it's another guy with another great changeup and command, but he's also really deceptive too. And I feel like he's got some really unique traits as far as like the release height and all that too.
Yeah, no, you're spot on there. That's the first thing I was going to bring up is like he's a shorter dude. He's around 6 feet and he's got a high slot and he extends well. So like when you look at his release point in space, this is where release height can get deceptive in my opinion. It's like it comes up dead average. But like how he's getting to that release point is not average because he's undersized and he's high slot. So like that high slot, it's a little like Shota Imanaga a little bit. It's not the same kind of like hand feel in terms of what they're doing with the ball, but Shota is very similar. Short guy, extends well, really high slot, rides his fastball. Messick's a little more cut, but it's that same principle of like, this just isn't a point in space there you're used to seeing this movement from. Something I always end up on with like a Paul Skeens or there's this Nationals guys, Travis Sikora, who I see the same thing with from the inverse standpoint, like huge dude, low slot, average release point, or he's above average release point, but you almost never see above average release points for guys who have low slots, you know? So like, that's where I come down to Messick. I think Messick's already better than Cecconi. He's a better pitcher. So I think projections got to agree with me on this. I would be surprised if they don't. But yeah, it's not primo velo. It's a weird body type, you know, but he's got results. He's got 4 or 5 pitches here that look good. Like I'm on him. Like I think Longenhagen was one of the first guys to be like, this is a major league starter. And the more I looked and watched him, I was like, I think I agree. You know, I kind of followed suit there and I'm pretty happy I did because I think again, I don't know how much upside there is, but this gets to the larger point we're going to talk about in a sec is like the Guardians' philosophies as an org. Like, I think they know they're not going to pay for a variety of guys, unfortunately. You know, it's just is what it is from an ownership standpoint. But as a result of that, like they care a lot more about these guys who can be like 4s and 5s than a team, say like the Dodgers or the Mets or one of these other teams, because it's just a matter of like those guys, you know, are more valuable to them. Like they're not going to go out and get a pitching prospect. They need the controlled guy who could post a 1.5 WAR a season. So to them internally, it's far more valuable. So yeah, I like Messick a lot. And I think he gets maybe a larger point of like, although he's not amazing, he's very relevant to the Guardians from a development standpoint.
So when you're evaluating pitchers, I mean, I know we could talk about the Guardians and what they do well. I think you've explained that well, and I think other people listening can kind of see it too. Like they've targeted extension guys, they've targeted.
Yeah,
it used to be they targeted a lot of over the slot guys. Now they've kind of shifted to that low release height, like the Logan Allens, the Messicks, all that kind of stuff. But when you're looking at pitchers, not necessarily like breakout picks, whatever, but like when you're evaluating guys and you're going through like data and biomechanics or whatever you're looking at, what are some of the things you tend to lean on? Like not biases, but like, okay, I've seen this work before. I've seen this in this guy. And these are the things I feel like really matter when it comes to like development of pitch shapes and spinning the ball and sequencing. Like what correlates then will be success that you feel really confident about in your time studying all this stuff.
Yeah, biomechanics is still something I'm very much trying to learn. Like that is definitely a blind spot, I think, to us on the public side, unless you have like hands-on experience with Kinetrax and stuff. So that is definitely, I think that is probably the next step on the public side. As to whether we'll ever make that step, I'm not entirely sure. I just don't think a lot of the data is ever going to become public. So it's more of like asking people that's probably my primary question to people a lot of the time is like, I could usually get 80% of the way there on the shapes and what they're doing with the ball and what adjustments they're making in their approach. A lot of the time it's me then going to the guy in an organization and asking, or like a coach or something like that, or trying to back into like, what is he doing in his body that's creating this, you know, or like, why would you push towards this? Or why do you think this guy, despite the fact he's really efficient, can get to a sweeper? What is it about how he gets to the release point, as we were talking with Messick? That's kind of the more artsy, ethereal land that I know a lot of teams are very locked on. The Guardians were an early team on Kinetrax, do a great job in developing velocity. They understand all this biomech stuff. Surfolio is a great example of that, going to the Cardinals now. Like he was in the Guardians org for forever. And I know he's like a huge biomech guy. A little bit of drive run roots there, I believe, as well, or at least some communication with drive line. And so like, I think that is like the more tougher spot to ID, but from like a public standpoint, if you can get access to the minor league data, I have full minor league data access. So that helps a lot. I enjoy zooming out and looking at like team trends, which I do occasionally on my YouTube and stuff, just to point out like what's going on from a team standpoint and such. So it's been fun to kind of poke on those individual elements to get, I think, understanding like what shapes they create, the velo they throw, and like what things will look like at the major league level are all like really to getting at like, is a pitcher going to be good? And I'd say like that's where I come down on the most, is like trying to parse through some of those elements and acknowledging that I'm not going to be perfect on some of the biomech stuff. So I don't know if that answers the question a lot. K-minus walk's important, throwing strikes is important. I think velo is super important. But pitching prospects are really hard to peg, man. Like they're really difficult. It's hard to understand which guys are going to make command leaps. It's hard to understand the capacity for a guy to add velocity, which could really change a projection. You know, I feel like I'm thinking in my brain on recent guys I looked at that hit all these points where it's just, I just didn't know he was going to add 2.5 ticks, completely changed the profile. I was just on a Mets spot talking about Jack Winninger, who's like a fun prospect in their org. He was like 92.5 and 24, and he was 94.9, I think, the second year. It's like, sure, if you tell me the guy's going to add 2.5 ticks, like I'm going to change my perspective on him. It's hard to call those things, which I think can be difficult to do. But it gives me a little more confidence in being in an org like the Guardians, where they do a good job on the velocity development side of things. So I know if a guy's 91, 92, like he's probably going to get to 94-ish in that area. I could probably assume a tick and a half reliably, as opposed to being in an org like the Angels or the Athletics or something along those lines, where it's probably less reliable to assume that.
Yeah, that's kind of why I'm bigger on Khal Steven too, is like he's been 92, 94, and I'm like, I think he's thrown 97 before, but I'm like,
he's a huge dude too. Like that's easy.
Yeah,
to dream on the velo there.
Yeah, there's projection, like you said, with Joey Cantillo, he's gotten bigger too. So yeah, that's one of the things you can kind of look at it and see going forward. Lance, I really appreciate you joining us and dropping all this great knowledge on us. I could have asked you like 100 million more questions, but fortunately we have to run. If you want to hear more from Lance, again, I highly recommend checking out his YouTube. I know you're on TikTok. I've seen your videos there too. And get the Substack, follow him on Twitter. And if you're into Cubs stuff, he's also on Marquee. So you can find a lot of content everywhere. And again, I feel smarter for watching him. It's entertaining. So if you're a baseball nerd like I am, definitely check out Lance on all those platforms. Appreciate you all tuning in today, and make sure you subscribe to get the latest episodes of Locked On Guardians as well. Maybe we'll have Lance back at some time during the year if he's got time for us. I know he's a busy guy, as I just said. You're out there on all avenues, but if you're listening, check out the Everydayer Club. That's ad-free access to the show, as well as the Discord to talk to us, other Locked On MLB hosts, and other sports as well. That's at joinsupercast.com/LockedOnGuardians. So we'll talk more tomorrow about pitching. I know Jeff's got a tinfoil hat there. He's going to share with you about ex-Cleveland pitchers and any news from camp. In the meantime, check out all of the content we just recommended, and go Guardians, go.